Bienvenidos, muchas gracias por estar hoy aquí de nuevo en Managing Chaos y hoy nos hace muchísima ilusión contar con Debbie Millman, que no es solo una gran diseñadora y estratega de marcas, sino que es alguien especialmente inspirador. Lleva 15 años con un podcast de gran éxito llamado Design Matters. So Debbie, I'll switch now to English. It's a big honor to have you here in this edition of Managing Chaos. Debbie is pure inspiration. It's not only for her podcast, where she talks about building a life and a career, but also for her books, for her implication and dedication to social causes, and for her amazing work with great brands. Debbie was key in selling brands, reaching her presidency, and being responsible for the brand identity of Burger King, Hershey's, Haagen Dazs, Tropicana, Gillette, Star Wars, you name it. She has a perfect understanding of how to build brands and how to communicate them. She's named one of the most creative people in business by Fast Company and one of the most influential designers working today by the Graphic Design USA. So she's one of the more respected figures in the world of design. And the best of it, and we'll talk about it later, is that she says that it all began by accident. So Debbie, welcome. Thanks a lot for being here. And first of all, how are you? How have you been? And what have you learned about all these situation?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm good. I'm healthy. I'm in Los Angeles, and I left New York in the middle of March to be here with my fiance. I'm doing okay. You know, some days are better than others. I miss New York. I miss the life that I had there, but I'm also doing really, really well here. And so I have no complaints.
Did you move for good to LA?
No,
or you're going back to New York? Yes. Well, actually, that was going to be one of my first questions, because I remember in a very interesting interview with Tim Ferriss, where you said that you did not really know the what or the how, but you were so sure about the where you wanted to start it, and it was New York. And I thought this was very inspiring, because sometimes, right, you need to hold on to something to start your career. And in your case, it was a city that inspired you.
Yes. Actually, I'm gonna do something fun. This is what I've been doing. This is a photo that I took.
That's the greatest city.
That's a photo that I took of Manhattan from the air in an airplane. And when I miss the city, I use it. So since I'll use it today because it's my special background.
That suits perfect. So what had New York? Was it about the energy? Was it about the people? What is about this idea that dreams can come true in this city? What drives you from New York?
I think it was the energy. I'm a native New Yorker, so it's not like I moved from another country or another state. I'm a native New Yorker. I was born in Brooklyn. I lived in Queens. I lived on Staten Island. So it was just the energy that really spoke to me, that called me.
Mm-hmm. And do you think New York is really a city of great opportunities?
I think it's a great city for everything. It's a city for opportunities. It's a city for culture. It's a city for ideas. It's a city for love. It's just, I think, the greatest city in the world.
Mm-hmm. You talk a lot in your talks about rejection and about failures along your career. What advice would you give to those who are going through rejections and failures?
Well, one of the questions that I've gotten over and over again that I've given a great deal of thought to in an effort to really answer it honestly and authentically is what made you keep going in the face of those rejections? How did you do that? And I think that ultimately my hope and desire for something bigger in my life was bigger than my shame or humiliation at being rejected. And so that kept propelling me forward. This need to achieve and have more and do more was something that ultimately outweighed the pain of being rejected.
Mhm. What were you chasing? What were you after? Did you know? Was it clear? Or was it some kind of energy and force?
No, I knew it was meaning. It was some achievement. It was some sense of having, of mattering in some way. I'm still chasing it. I'm still looking for it. I still feel very much that I haven't reached my peak, that I haven't done everything that I want to do. So there's so much that I would like to do.
Mhm. That is probably what keeps you going, right? This not being satisfied at 100%.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm. What about the suffering? Do you think it's useful? It somehow boosts creativity?
Um, I don't know that it boosts creativity. I think creativity boosts creativity, and being creative boosts your creativity. I don't know that suffering necessarily boosts creativity, because I know a lot of people that are happy that make amazing creative things.
Mhm.
Um, what was the first part of the question? Because I feel like there's something else that I want to say about that.
I was just making reference to the suffering. So if somehow maybe experienced through rejection, but when you're suffering somehow, does it somehow arise? Does something arise from suffering that boosts creativity, that gives you ideas on how to go along, how to stay along?
Well, I think that creativity boosts creativity. I think that suffering can give you a certain vulnerability and empathy to be able to recognize some universal things
Mm-hmm.
that are important.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't recommend suffering as a pathway to creativity, because as somebody that suffered in the past, um, that can be debilitating.
Mm-hmm. What is at the end of your work? You said we were talking about meaning, about searching for meaning. Um, what do you think, if you could describe now what through your different projects, through your work, what is that meaning that you are searching for?
Um, well, I don't think that there's one answer to that. I think there's a feeling of fulfilling one's potential, knowing that you're working with everything in your heart, um, feeling as if what you're making is honest.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the things that I'm still working to find. You know, where do you get how can you manifest the courage to fully reveal yourself in an effort to be as honest as possible in what you're making?
Mm-hmm. Do you
That's something that I still am looking for.
Mm-hmm. I've always thought that somehow creativity is the straightest path, the most direct path to get to freedom somehow, and that the more free that you feel, the more creative you can be. So how
Yeah,
do
I do think that's true. I do think the more free you can be, the more creative you can be. But I don't know that creativity leads to freedom. I think that awareness leads to freedom, and then freedom leads to creativity.
Okay, and what do you mean by awareness exactly?
Understanding who you are, understanding your motivations, understanding your the sort of lies you tell yourself about things. Just understanding your the way that you've constructed your life for your own purposes, and understanding what that means, and what are the ramifications of that, and what are the trappings of that.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the types of things that I mean.
Is it something you think about? Is it something?
Oh yeah, of course, every day, every single day, every single day.
Uh-huh. Could you tell us a little bit who you are? Who?
I don't even know how I would do that. I'm a person who is striving for a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. I'm a teacher. I am a sister, an aunt, a partner. I try to be an artist.
Mhm.
That's
What would you say you are best at?
self-loathing.
Yes, that's it.
Self-criticism. What am I good at? I don't know. I think I'm a good interviewer.
Mhm. I was gonna talk about this. I guess you've got this genuine interest on people, no? Somehow
Yes.
you really. I mean, I've listened to almost all your podcasts, so you can really tell that you are interested in people, no? And that the time that you're interviewing, you are liberated, you are free, you're really in this conversation.
Yes.
You started a podcast when nobody was talking about podcasts. That it's a very long time ago, and you always say that we can talk about making a difference, we can make a difference, or we can do both. In your podcast, you are achieving both, I guess.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm. What is the objective? What is the objective of the podcast? Is to inspire and to give people tools to live their lives?
That's hard to say. I think that for me, it is what I try to do is have conversations about how people create their lives and who they are, what made them who they are, how did they manage through their obstacles, how have they created something meaningful in the world. And so I guess if that can be inspiring, that's definitely a benefit. I am trying to create an environment where people can share who they are with others in an effort for other people to understand how people have made the things that they've made.
Mm-hmm. What have you learned along all these years of podcasts and interviews? What lessons have you learned that you have taken with you?
Well, I've learned that people are insecure, that people have self-doubt. Everyone does. I don't think the only two people that I've ever interviewed that I felt, and I've gotten this question quite a lot, so I've thought about it a lot. The only two people that I've interviewed that don't have any self-doubt were Massimo Vignelli, the late great Massimo Vignelli, and Milton Glaser. And I interviewed them both when they were in their 80s. So I think by the time you're in your 80s, maybe you don't have any more fucks to give, right? Everybody else, like the most famous film directors, theater director, the director of Hamilton, the most famous artists that I've interviewed, musicians, designers, writers, scientists, whoever I've interviewed, there's always some element of, can I do this again? Is my best work behind me? How do I keep making something relevant? Everybody struggles with these questions. And so that's something that I think is just part of the process. I interviewed Cheryl Strayed yesterday, and the episode isn't on air yet, but she talked about recognizing that when she wrote her first novel, that when she looks back at her journals, she realizes that if anybody were to read those journals, they'd think that the book was never published because it was, I'm a failure. How am I going to do this? Is anybody going to read this? What? And it was a real success. So she recognized that that's just part of her process of making work, that there's that self-doubt, there's that questioning, there's that fear, but that's just part of the process.
So being human is being in doubt your whole life, or at least until you're like Milton Glaser, like 80 years old.
80, I think 80, yeah. And that people still want to know that they're able to make their best work in the future. I interviewed David Lee Roth, who was the frontman for Van Halen in the 1980s. It was the most popular band in the world. And I asked him what that felt like, and, you know, to be the most popular rock and roll band in the world. And his response is something that just shattered me because it was so true. He said, you know, you have to be really careful when you get to the top of the mountain, because You're usually alone. It's always cold, and there's only one direction
Wow.
to go in. And what that led me to understand is it's okay to take your time walking up the mountain, because you don't want to peak when you're 30. You don't want to peak when you're 40. You want to peak the day before you die, right?
Totally.
And so take that time to get to the top, because that's when where do you go from there? And so I don't want to peak until, you know, the day before I die. I want to keep growing and making more work and doing things that are meaningful.
So interesting. Would you say that getting to the top is a success for you, or success is something else?
I don't have a definition of success.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, because every time I've thought that something would be the thing that made me happy, when you get it, it gives you happiness for a few moments, and then you are metabolizing that and then want more. And it's no different with a promotion or with a new, when you get a new pair of shoes or a bag or a car or an iPhone, whatever it is, you're happy in that moment. And then, you know, we metabolize our emotions and our purchases very quickly. And so if you're using that to determine your self-worth or to define success or happiness, you're going to find that that is fleeting. And so I am just looking to try to be content. You know, happiness,
Mm-hmm.
I think, is being content with what you have
Mm-hmm.
and not needing more.
Mm-hmm. Is it something you have achieved?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. It comes and goes, no? It comes and goes.
Like anything else, like the weather. I mean, I'm old enough to know that the storm clouds will pass, both literally and figuratively.
Mm-hmm. What about when we were talking about the podcast when you started? I know that you paid $6,000 to go on air for the first time. Did you do that out of intuition? Was that an urge of communicating? Why did you make this step?
Well, at the time, I was working at Sterling Brands. I was the president of Sterling Brands, and I had spent the last 8 or 9 years like fully committed to that commercial work, and had at the time all but abandoned any of my self-generated work, drawing, writing, all of that had sort of fallen by the wayside. And while I was thrilled at the success, because it was really the first time in my life that I had ever been successful, and that was why I then fully committed to it. It felt really good to be successful for the first time in my life in my late 30s. I was at that point, after 8 or 9 years of this, feeling really like I was losing my creative soul. And so I decided this was a bit of a Hail Mary, because it was an opportunity for me to do something that felt like it could be creative, but also something that might also allow me to insert some professionality and business into it. So it was a bit of a hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
And that really did become one of the things that I'm most proudest of doing.
Mm-hmm.
That was 15 years ago. Isn't that amazing? It was 15 years ago.
I know. Over 500 interviews, no?
Probably close to that. It's not over 500, but it's between 400 and 500.
Mm-hmm. I would like to know, how do you feel about intuition? Have you followed your intuition along your career? Have you listened to your body to find the answers? What has driven somehow every move forward that you've done?
I have a really keen intuition, and I haven't always listened to it.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I haven't listened to it, I've regretted not listening to it, because it's really quite astonishing how many times I didn't listen to it, where if I had, outcomes would have been very different. I'm learning as I get older now to listen to it more, but I still don't always trust it as much as I should.
Mm-hmm.
When I have, it's been really, really beneficial. And when I haven't, I wish that I'd had.
Mm-hmm. I remember I was at Milton Glaser's studio about 3 or 4 years ago interviewing him, and he told me the same exercise he does to his students that you were also sharing the other day in one with Tim Ferriss in the podcast. I would like to know, did you do yourself this exercise like some time ago?
I did it with Milton in his class.
How you
I
did
took
it?
his
Yeah,
class in
that's amazing.
2005, about 3 months after I started the podcast. So I started the podcast, no, maybe a little more. I started the podcast in February of 2005, and I took his class in August of 2005, or July or August.
Wow, that
And
was fun.
yeah, it was a summer intensive. So it was the summer of 2005. And it profoundly changed me, profoundly.
What did you write down? What did you write down where you were, what you then did live 10 years after? Was it exactly like this? Exactly.
Exactly. It was 5 years. His plan was a 5-year plan because his class was for mid-career designers, whereas most of the people that I teach are at the beginning of their career. And so I wanted to give them a bit more runway. But even still, I would say that more things happened in the full 10 years and are still happening. I wrote another one in 2017. And so things are manifesting there as well.
I've read a story where your mom gave you a box when you moved to Florida, where there were a lot of drawings that somehow were anticipating your future.
Yeah, just one. Yeah, it was amazing. It was a drawing that I did that I had no way of knowing. I wasn't living in Manhattan at the time. I think I was probably living either in Queens. Yeah, it was probably Queens. And I made this drawing of walking in the streets of Manhattan. It's very clearly Manhattan. And really was very specific with details. Like the name of the bank was bank, and the name of the dry cleaners was cleaners, and the taxi was taxi. But I had a delivery truck on the streets of Manhattan, and it said Lay's potato chips, and I drew the logo. So there I am, 40 years later, living in Manhattan, going to the bank, going to dry cleaners, riding around in taxis and buses, and drawing logos for a living.
If you were to be given another box like this right now, where do you think, what would be inside of it? What would be the drawing of it?
Oh, I don't know. That would be hard to say. Before COVID, maybe being on an airplane and drawing a picture like this. But right now, it would be very hard to say because everything is so uncertain.
I know. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with uncertainty?
Not well. Not well. I've had a hard time. I mean, I'm a little bit more used to the uncertainty now, but initially it was quite jarring, not knowing. I'm a big list planner. I like to make lists. I have a paper calendar. I like to keep track of things, and it's very hard not to have that control. But it's all an illusion. It's not like I really had the control. You just think you have the control because you think you know what's going to happen. But it's really just predictive based on what's already happened. Now we don't have that ability to have that predictive sensibility because there's nothing to base it on. So, I mean, we're all in the same situation. It's just a matter of what illusions or delusions we think we have about control.
Mm-hmm. Has your life changed a lot before COVID and during
COVID?
Oh
my God, everything has changed. First of all, I'm living in Los Angeles. I've never, ever, ever in my life been away from New York for this long.
Wow.
My entire life. I'm almost 59 years old, and I've never spent this much time away from New York. So it's going on 9 weeks. So that's huge. I'm teaching online. I used to teach in person. I'm doing my podcast now through Zoom. I only did it in person. So everything is different. Everything is different.
Mm-hmm. Are you okay with it? With this new digital connections and conversations, or you're much a holder of the physical?
It's a good question. I think I'm both because I tend to approach any kind of change with enormous resistance. Mm-hmm. I'm a very fixed personality. I like schedules. I like knowing what's happening. I like routine. I like ritual. I like going to my same coffee shop. I like walking to work. I like, there's so many things that I like to do in the way that I've been doing them, but can't now. So I think both. Some days I'm like, oh, wow, new opportunities, new ways of thinking, new ways of trying things. I'm gardening, I'm doing new things. And then other days I'm like, I want my old life back. But it's, it's both. It's both.
Yeah. I was interviewing Javier Jaén, who's a very important illustrator here based in Spain, but that publishes all over. And he was telling me that it's not about dates, it's be inside the same day. You sometimes feel at top and sometimes feel at the bottom, no, in the same day. So it's like a total crazy way of living right now.
Yes, yes. When I came here, when I came to Los Angeles, my fiance said, pack for 2 weeks. So I didn't even have that much stuff with me. And stuff is sort of an interesting concept, but just the things that I was used to using every day. Like, for example, this mug. This mug is a mug that I had at home, this style, this artist. And I didn't have any of those mugs here. And so I found some on eBay. so now it's like, oh, I have my mug back. So things like that.
Oh yes, we've learned a lot of things. What would you say you have learned about yourself during this period? Something that has surprised you?
I guess the biggest thing is that I can indeed exist outside of New York.
Mm.
I've had two or three trips outside of New York. So actually one was in Spain. I was an au pair, a mother's helper in Madrid. When I was 15. And then I did that, and that was for a summer, not quite the whole summer, but I would say it was probably about 8 weeks I spent in Spain, which was amazing. And I actually, by the time I was ready to go home, I had started speaking Spanish, which was amazing.
Wow.
I can't do now, but then I was able to. So that was the first big trip away from New York in my life. The second was going to Israel for 6 weeks. And that was in 1991. Mm-hmm. And then last January, so January 2019, I did a National Geographic trip around the world. And that was 25 days. So this is now the 4th time I've been away. Each time was profound. And I've learned that it's possible. I miss it tremendously. The difference with those other 3 trips was that I knew I was coming. I knew when I was going home. I knew the end date. Here I don't. So that's a little bit disconcerting, but I'm learning. I'm learning every day.
Mm-hmm. I was interviewing last week on Friday. I was interviewing Stefan Zackmeister, or 2 weeks ago, and he was telling me about either having a job, a career, or a calling. Mm. What would you say you have?
Job, a career, or calling? I would say I have a career and a calling. Mm. Yeah, definitely a calling. And I used to have a job, but that job set the stage and the foundation for a career and a calling. And for young people out there that are here or listening, it takes a long time to have a career. You don't just buy a career on the shelf like you would, a soda or potato chips. You don't just go and get a job. You develop your job. You develop your career through that job. You develop your calling through. And this gets back to what I was saying before about the way in which you want to peak. If you hit the big time in your 30s, you then have to manifest that over and over and over again. You have to keep making that over and over again. You have to keep bettering yourself. Otherwise you're has-been, right? You've done your best work in your 30s. Who wants that? So the longer it takes, the longer it'll last. So for those of you that are still like at the very sort of foundation of that mountain, realize that you have so much opportunity to make and grow. For the people that make it really big, I now that, I'm the age I am, I worry for them. I worry for them because how do you keep hitting the big time over and over and over again? There's always going to be peaks and valleys. And so don't worry so much if you haven't made it by the time you're 30, because you can still make it when you're 40 and 50 and 60. And look at Paula Scher, you know, she's still making some of the greatest work of her life, and she's 70. So same thing with Steve Heller. He's in his late 60s and still making and writing some of the best work of his life.
That is so interesting. And what do you think, what role plays transformation in all of that? Because I guess, no, that while you get along with your career and get forward with your career, you also transform yourself continuously, no?
I mean, one would hope, yeah. But transformation is an iterative process. It's not instant. We're not butterflies. You know, it takes time to become who we are and grow into who we are and have the awareness to know what we want and don't want. Those things take time and experimenting.
Mm-hmm. Would you say passion takes also time? Is something that comes with time?
No, I think passion is just something we feel. Mm-hmm. I think that integrating that passion into our calling or our career takes time, but we love what we love. Mm-hmm. And we either allow ourselves to grow into that love, with that passion, or we cut it off. And when we cut it off, that's, I think, where the tragedy is. It's not failing that's the tragedy. It's not allowing ourselves to fail. That's the tragedy.
Is everyone able to develop a passion or to feel passion?
I don't know. I hope so. I don't know why not, but I don't have the scientific answer to that, but mm-hmm. I think as long as we can feel, why wouldn't we be able to? You know, do you allow yourself is the question, really, I think. Not whether or not you can, but whether or not you should or could.
Mm-hmm. You've got a lot of students, you teach a lot. What would you say is the most important lesson you give them, and which is the most important lesson you get from them?
Good question. I think the most important thing we give them, the most important, not the only thing, but the most important is knowledge of what it really means to work hard. We instill in them a work ethic that will stay with them their lives and make them highly, highly competitive. We also give them lots of other things, lots of knowledge, lots of education, courage to take the next step into their careers, lots and lots of networking and incredible clients and projects. But I think that the lead gene we provide is this: we instill this sense of what it really, really means to work hard and be competitive. In terms of what they give me, it's an endless list of ideas and creativity and a sense of what the future holds and optimism. I mean, I probably get more than they get, but I would hope that at least it's equal.
Mm-hmm. What do you, I know it's a very difficult question, but what do you enjoy more, the teaching or the podcasting? Where do you get more?
Yeah, I don't think of it that way. It's hard for me to say I like this more than that. I feel like they're both children of mine, and I love them both. I love them differently, but I love them equally. And they each give me different things and give other people different things. But the one common denominator between the both is that I hope that it instills other people with curiosity. You know, I hope my program, in addition to offering sort of this work ethic, providing a work ethic and a competitiveness that I think is really world class, I would hope that there's a curiosity about how branding impacts the world. And I would say the same about the podcast. It is, I'm hoping, a way for people to view the world through somebody else's eyes and be curious about how that feels and what that's like.
Mm-hmm. You started one big point too, which is the impact that the design has to have in the world. How do you see that? How do you see, how can design, DM, impact the world?
Well, I think that the culture of design reflects the culture of our culture. You know, we have the ability as designers, as communicators, as makers to influence everything about the world, everything about messaging, everything about who we are, how we live. And I think that the condition of our brands, the condition of design really reflects the condition of our culture. Culture doesn't make us, we make culture. And we do that through design and through branding and through the decisions that we make. So I think that it is one of the most important and significant markers of who we are. And, you know, we've been branding and marking since Lascaux, you know, 32,000 years ago. So I think that it's an innate part of our DNA, this ability to manufacture meaning with symbols and with marks. And I'm endlessly fascinated by how and why we do that.
What do you think about the personal brands? So did you also think about creating a brand for yourself? Was that consciously effort?
I have real issue with people seeking to be brands because brands are manufactured. Brands don't grow in trees. We don't pick them off of a tree branch. We don't grow them in the ground. Brands are manufactured. We manufacture meaning into something. We create a symbol that reflects an attitude or a deliverable or a promise of what is either inside or on it or in it. People are messy. We are evolving constantly. We are inconsistent. We lie. We hide things from ourselves, to ourselves, from ourselves, with others. We're really complicated, and we are living, breathing. We have a soul. We're not manufactured. We can have a reputation, and that's what I think we should seek to develop a reputation. But if we have a product with our name on it, obviously that has to be a brand, but it's separate from the person, because the person is the living, breathing, changing, calculating entity. So I think that when we're thinking about our personal selves, that we are developing a reputation. When we're thinking about an entity that's manufactured, even if it has our name on it, it's still separate from who we are as a living, breathing person who will bleed when cut. That is the big difference. So you can have a personal reputation or you can have a manufactured brand. But a personal brand feels like a bit of an oxymoron to me.
I have to say that is the best answer I have ever gotten to this question. So thanks a lot, because that was very clear. And you know, there was something that I wasn't comfortable about the concept personal brand, and now I know why. So that was very clarifying. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You say, and we've talked about this in the conversation, that the longest it takes, the longer it will last. No? So success, what you were saying, is less explosive, less spectacular, less something else when it takes time to achieve.
Yeah.
That's the thing about not reaching the peak in our 30s, but trying to continuously
evolve.
All right.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. I think the internet was weak at that point. I didn't hear you the question.
No, it was just about that. So it's just like a lesson or an advice, let's put it this way, that you would give to all the students, right? To take it easy, take it slowly.
Well, I think I don't know if I would say easy or slowly. I would just say take it thoughtfully and deliberately.
Okay.
And go at the pace you feel comfortable, not what you think. You don't race others. Just seek within yourself to make the best possible work.
Debbie, we're running out of time. It's just like a couple of minutes more, but I wanted to ask one more question, and then we'll have time for 2 questions of people who is listening to us.
Okay.
What would you say is your next big goal? Where are you going to? What would you like to somehow to complete?
Well, I have been working for years writing visual stories in different formats. I teach that class on Skillshare about visual storytelling, and which provides a lot of history in storytelling, visual storytelling. And so I've been painting words since my 20s, and then created Look Both Ways and Self-Portrait as Your Trader, both books of illustrated essays and poetry. And it's evolved into visual storytelling that I do in 10 panels on Instagram or beyond in other formats. And so that's something that I'm really, really interested in, and I'm doing quite a lot more of. And I think I'd like to continue to explore that as a way of telling stories. So with images, words, photographs, painted photographs. I've been doing a lot of painting on photographs. And so that's the kind of work I'm really excited by lately.
Super. It was such a pleasure, Debbie. Very inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you. Great questions. Great questions. And your shirt is just absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you. I was telling, I have, these days that I've been like 70 days closed in my house, I run out of photos because every day I do a live. So it's like, I don't have anything else. And I found this like from 20 years ago. I don't know.
It's fabulous. Absolutely fabulous.
Thanks a lot. That was beyond inspiring. It's been a great pleasure. I'm a big follower of yours. So thanks a lot for your time. Thanks everyone who joined too. And
thank you all for being here. It's so awesome.
Super pleasure. Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.